Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Thai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the sum of the Bodhis. All glories to the sum of the Bodhis. All glories to the sum of the Bodhis. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Please repeat. Krishna, 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 Hey. Krishna, 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 Hey. Krishna, 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 Rakshamam. Krishna, 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 Pahimam. Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rakshamam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahimam. So today we're going to be reading from chapter 4, which is entitled Kamsa Begins His Persecutions. After Vasudeva adjusted things as they had been before he carried Krishna to Gokula, and all the doors and gates became similarly closed, the gatekeepers awoke and heard the newborn child crying. Kamsa was waiting to hear the news of the child's birth, and the gatekeepers immediately approached him and informed him that the child was born. At that time, Kamsa got up from his bed very quickly and exclaimed, "Now the cruel death of my life is born." Kamsa became perplexed now that his death was approaching, and his hair scattered. Immediately he proceeded toward the place where the child was born. So just to recap a little bit, Vasudeva and Devaki were in the prison house. And if those who have not been to Krishna Janmastami in Vrindavan, or in Mathura, and gone down into the actual place where Krishna and Devaki were kept, it's down a few floors, and now of course it's been built up since the time of Kamsa, but the cell which the Lord and where Devaki and Vasudeva were incarcerated is just a teeny little room with thick concrete walls, you could say, or brick walls. Very terrible conditions you can imagine. Sometimes you see these pictures of, and if anyone's been to this prison that's up in the Bay Area, what's it called? That Alcatraz. Alcatraz is even better. At least Alcatraz has some windows. But this place where the Lord appeared is just a terrible, cold, dank place. And although every year they have some very nice gatherings to commemorate the Lord's appearance, it's just a reminder how evil Kamsa was, to keep his sister and brother-in-law and the children that were born of her in such conditions. We can't fathom. It's just the evilness that was there. So when he heard that the new child had been born, Kamsa became perplexed, as described here. Devaki, on seeing her brother approaching, prayed in a very meek attitude toward Kamsa, "My dear brother, please do not kill this female child. I promise that this child will be the wife of your son. Therefore, don't kill her. You are not to be killed by any female child. The omen was that you are to be killed by a male child. So please do not kill her. My dear brother, you have killed so many of my children who were just born, shining like the sun. That is not your fault. You have been advised by demoniac friends to kill my children. But now I beg you to excuse this girl at least. Let her live as my daughter." The Lord states in Bhagavad Gita, "Etang drishtim avastabhya natmanot no alpabudhaya," that the demoniac persons who are lost in themselves and have no intelligence engage in all sorts of unbeneficial works which are meant to destroy the world. And Kamsa here is a very good example of that he was so envious of the Lord and such evil-minded that he was prepared to kill all of the children of Vasudeva and Devaki, and even a female child. What to speak of what's going on in modern society, in present-day society, where people are engaged in so many terrible, unmentionable activities. Kamsa was so cruel that he did not listen to the pitiful prayers of his sister Devaki. He forcibly grabbed the newborn child to rebuke his sister and attempted to dash her on a stone mercilessly. This is a graphic example of a cruel demon who could sacrifice all relationships for the sake of personal gratification. But the child immediately slipped out of his hands, went up into the sky, and appeared with 8 arms as the younger sister of Vishnu. She was decorated with nice garments and flower garlands and ornaments. In her 8 hands she held a bow, lance, arrows, sword, conch shell, disc, club, and shield. Seeing the appearance of the child, who was actually the goddess Durga, all the demigods from different planets like Siddhaloka, Charanaloka, Gandharvaloka, Apsaraloka, Kinaraloka, Urugaloka, presented her with various articles and began to offer their respective prayers. From above, the goddess addressed Kamsa, "You rascal, how can you kill me? The child who will kill you is already born before me somewhere within this world. Don't be so cruel to your poor sister." After this appearance, Goddess Durga became known by various names in various parts of the world. When you go to Mayapur and cross the river and go to Navadvip, they have a very large Durga temple there. It's just right across the street in the city proper. And every day there's a deity of Kali there. And every day when you walk by there, if you happen to walk by, almost any time of the day practically, there are tens of dozens of people who are walking by, and they have different offerings that they present to this deity. And it can be various fruits and vegetables and live animals particularly. And they take it before the deity and they cut its throat. And they just let the blood flow down in front of the altar. Unfortunately, they're thinking that this is prasad, Durga prasad. But in reality, it's the darkest things that a person can engage in. And not knowing, in the course of their puja, they're not knowing that this same deity is standing on their head. As if you see the deity, there's the form of the deity. She's standing, but at her foot, at one of her feet, she has her foot right on one of her worshippers' heads. And it's such a ghastly scene. It's truly ghastly when you walk into the temple. It's like you shake from how dark and ghastly the whole scene is. But she comes to engage in her service to the Lord, and that is to punish the miscreants. After hearing these words, Kamsa became very much overwhelmed with fear. Out of pity, he immediately released Vasudeva and Devaki from the bondage of their shackles and very politely began to address them. He said, "My dear sister and brother-in-law, I have acted just like a demon in killing my own nephews, your children, and thereby I have given up all consideration of our intimate relationship. I do not know what will be the result of these envious acts of mine. Probably I shall be sent to the hell where killers of brahmanas go. I am surprised, however, that the celestial prophecy has not come true. It is not only in human society that false propaganda is found. Now it appears that even these celestial denizens speak lies. Because I believed in the words of these celestial denizens, I have committed so many sins by killing the children of my sister. My dear Vasudeva and Devaki, you are both very great souls. I have no instructions to give you, but still I request that you not be sorry for the death of your children. Every one of us is under the control of superior power, and that superior power does not allow us to remain together." Just see the stupid or the ignorant logic. It's astounding. We are bound to be separated from our friends and relatives in due course of time. But we must know for certain that even after the disappearance of the different material bodies, the soul remains intact eternally. And now he's becoming philosophical all of a sudden. For example, there are many pots made of earthly clay, and they are prepared and also broken. But in spite of this, the earth remains as it is perpetually. Similarly, the bodies of the soul under different conditions are made and destroyed, but the spirit soul remains eternally. So there is nothing to lament over. Everyone should understand that this material body is different from the spirit soul, and so long as one does not come to that understanding, he is sure to accept the processes of transmigration from one body to another. Amazing. As if he's in a position to preach to Vasudeva. My dear sister, Devaki, you are so gentle and kind. Please excuse me. Don't be aggrieved by the death of your children, which I have caused. Actually, this was not done by me. Because all these are predestined activities. One has to act according to the predestined plan, even unwillingly. It's very convenient that the demons talk about predestiny, but they don't want to address or recognize who is it that's administering that destiny, as if it just comes out of the blue. You've created it, and now you have to live it. It just does not make sense. One has to act according to the predestined plan, even unwillingly. People misunderstand that with the end of the body, the self dies, or they think that one can kill another living entity. All these misconceptions oblige one to accept the conditions of material existence. In other words, as long as one is not firmly convinced of the eternality of the soul, one is subjected to the tribulation of being killer and killed. My dear sister Devaki and brother-in-law Vasudeva, kindly excuse the atrocities I have committed against you. I am very poor-hearted, and you are so great-hearted, so take compassion upon me and excuse me. Isn't there in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, there's this Brahmin who was who was it? He was commenting that why are you lamenting? I forget. To Madhavendra. Yes. There's another pastime also where was it Ramchandra? I'm trying to remember. But it's similar to this idea that the demons make it very convenient that why are you lamenting? This world is temporary. It has no purpose, and you just have to get beyond it. I wish I could remember this. It's a wonderful pastime in Chaitanya Leela. Hopefully it comes to me. Vasudeva took the opportunity of Kamsa's benevolence and informed him that his atheistic activities were also due to his misconception of life, namely taking the material body to be the self. When Vasudeva talked with Kamsa in such an illuminating way, Kamsa became very much pleased, and his guilt for killing his nephews subsided. With the permission of his sister Devaki and brother-in-law Vasudeva, he returned to his home with a relieved mind. But the next day, Kamsa called all his counselors together and narrated to them all the incidents that had happened the night before. All the counselors of Kamsa were demons and eternal enemies of the demigods. So they became depressed upon hearing their master speak of the night's events. And although they were not very much experienced or learned, they began to give instructions to Kamsa as follows. Dear sir, let us now make arrangements to kill all children who were born within the last 10 days in all towns, countries, villages, and pasturing grounds. Let us execute this plan indiscriminately. We think that the demigods cannot do anything against us if we perform these atrocities. They are always afraid of fighting with us, and even if they wish to check our activities, they will not dare to do so. Because of your immeasurable strength, they fear your bow. Indeed, we have practical experience that whenever you stood to fight with them and began to shower your arrows on them, they immediately fled in all directions just to save their lives. Many of the demigods were unable to fight with you, and they immediately surrendered themselves unto you by loosening their turbans and the tufts of hair on their heads. With folded hands they begged you to spare them and said, My Lord, we are all afraid of your strength. Please release us from this dangerous fight. We have also seen many times that you would never kill such surrendered fighters when they were all fearful, their bows, arrows, and chariots broken, forgetful of their military activities, and unable to fight with you. So actually we have nothing to fear from these demigods. They are very proud of being great fighters in peacetime outside the war field. But actually they cannot show any talent or military power on the war field. Although Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, and Lord Brahma are always ready to help the demigods headed by Indra, we have no reason to be afraid of them. As far as Lord Vishnu is concerned, he has already hidden himself within the hearts of all living entities, and he cannot come out. Okay, he's stuck in there. As far as Lord Shiva is concerned, he has renounced all activities. He has already entered into the forest. And Lord Brahma is always engaged in different types of austerities and meditation. And what to speak of Indra? He is a straw in comparison to your strength. Therefore, we have nothing to fear from any of these demigods. But we must not neglect them, for the demigods are our determined enemies. We must be careful to protect ourselves. To root them out of their existence, we should just engage ourselves in your service and be always ready for your command. Not very good advisors. And of course, this is the typical mentality of the demoniac persons. They consider themselves to be all-powerful, and they speak very boldly. And out of madness, they think they can match or stand up to the potency of the Lord, but without fail, they're quickly defeated. And then Bhagavatam gives so many wonderful examples of such personalities. But here, in this pastime, we're seeing how they're so deluded, these materialistic persons, that again they think that there's no superior power, that they can do as they choose, and who can question what they're doing. The demons continue to say, if there is some disease in the body which is neglected, it worsens and becomes incurable. Similarly, when one is not careful about restraining the senses and lets them loose, it is then very difficult to control them. Therefore, we must now be very careful of the demigods before they get too strong to be subdued. The foundation of the strength of the demigods is Lord Vishnu, because the ultimate goal of all religious principles is to satisfy him. The Vedic injunctions, the brahmanas, the cows, austerities, sacrifices, performances of charity and distribution of wealth, are all for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu. So let us immediately begin by killing all the brahmanas who are in charge of the Vedic knowledge, along with the great sages who are in charge of sacrificial ritualistic performances. Let us kill all the cows, which are the source of butter, which is so necessary for performing sacrifices. Please give us your permission to kill all these creatures. Actually, the limbs of the transcendental body of Lord Vishnu are the brahmanas, the cows, Vedic knowledge, austerity, truthfulness, sense and mind control, faithfulness, charity, tolerance, and performance of sacrifices. Lord Vishnu is situated in everyone's heart and is the leader of all demigods, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. Therefore, we think that to persecute the great sages and brahmanas is to kill Lord Vishnu. Thus, being advised by his demoniac ministers, Kamsa, who was from the very beginning the greatest rascal, decided to persecute the brahmanas and Vaishnavas, being entrapped by the shackles of all-devouring eternal time. He ordered the demons to harass all kinds of saintly persons, and then he entered his house. The adherents of Kamsa were all influenced by the mode of passion as well as illusion by the mode of ignorance, and their only business was to create enmity with saintly persons. Such activities can only reduce one's duration of life. The demons accelerated the process and invited their deaths as soon as possible. The result of persecuting saintly persons is not only untimely death. The act is so offensive that the perpetrator also gradually loses his beauty, his fame, and his religious principles, and thus his promotion to higher planets is checked. And anyone who's been out on some preaching program can relate to this interesting statement that is made here, that as soon as these saintly persons are harassed and attacked sometimes by these demoniac persons, without a doubt, the perpetrators, as Prabhupada points out here, lose their beauty, their fame, their religious principles, and because of such activities, also their lives are shortened. I recall actually one year we were in Chicago O'Hare during the days when airport was still available, and there were always some kind of persons coming through and harassing the devotees. And one time I remember being over by Eastern Airlines, which is on the other side of, there were three main concourses. There was American, United, and Eastern. Eastern was led into International. If anyone remembers the old O'Hare Airport, it was quite a beautiful field field of distribution, field for distribution. And regularly we would have these businessmen coming by and harassing the devotees. And I remember distributing one time by this was by the USO. The USO was down there also. And there was one lady there. Her name was Dorothy. So we used to call her Demon Dorothy. And she would make it her business to go around harassing devotees and breaking up sales and really making distribution miserable. But the devotees were more than willing to meet the challenge, and this went on for many years. One year I remember distributing there, and I was talking to some young man, and she was a short distance away talking to another big heavy-set businessman, and again she would make it her practice to pull somebody off to the side, and then they would start pointing out to these people are like this or like that. So she was talking to some big heavy-set business fella, and I saw him from the corner of my eye coming, and as I was talking to this young man, he came up and he started using a lot of vulgar language that we don't want to use here. But he, broke up the sale, unfortunately, and started walking away. And I turned to another person and started to engage him, and all of a sudden I heard a thump, and there was a commotion, not more than 25 feet away. And this big heavy-set businessman had fallen down, and he had a heart attack, and he died on the spot. It's a true story. He died on the spot, and all of a sudden there were all sorts of people that were surrounding him. So you can be sure that these persons who act like Kamsa and act like the so-called advice givers and counselors of Kamsa-like people, without a doubt, and as described in the 7th canto, Prahlad describes, right, that civilization which is envious of the Brahmanas, the Vaishnavas, the Vedic literatures, the cows, that civilization will be quickly destroyed. So, without a doubt, we can take strength and encouragement from the strength of Vasudeva and Devaki here, and and be encouraged that certainly Krishna will come and protect his devotees and will punish those persons who are engaged in such activities. Of course, I'm sure everyone has some really incredible experiences and stories out there, but we can understand that an offense at the lotus feet of the devotees and brahmanas is a greater offense than that committed at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A civilization that commits such sinful activities generally loses all faith in the Supreme Lord, and such a godless civilization becomes the source of all calamities in human society. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 4th chapter of Krishna. Kamsa begins his persecutions. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, just in closing, it's not a mystery why there's so many difficulties in society, why there are so many calamities. It's because this godless civilization is engaged in all sorts of terrible acts meant to destroy the world. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, these demoniac persons, they're so deluded, they don't know what is to be done. They don't know what to do and what not to do. Everything they do is a source of misery, not only for those around them, but especially for themselves. So, these descriptions that we're hearing from Krishna book, as given to us by Srila Prabhupada, are real. They're not imaginary pastimes or stories or fantasies. I remember when the Krishna book first came out, and when I first read it, I thought, well, these are just fantastic stories. That's very nice. Whoever wrote this had a really poetic mind. But no, these are actual occurrences, and when you go to Mathura and you see where Krishna appeared, you go to Vrindavan where Krishna engaged in all of these transcendental pastimes, it strengthens that faith that Krishna is there and he will protect his devotees. So we'll end there. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Sachitanoi.
At least for myself, that since this demoniac mentality is pervaded everywhere, any conditioned souls that come to this material world, it becomes aloof from the service of Krishna. So here I am, I'm trying to become a devotee. So to the degree that influence is there, I can call myself like a demon, although I'm a devotee, trying to be a devotee. So then my reflection is that we also should be careful how to behave and act, so that doesn't say, oh, I'm a devotee, Krishna is going to protect me. Krishna protects those persons who actually are pure-hearted, 100%. And the other ones, it might be the most material nature that, we think, oh, no, why is this happening to me? So, this is an opportunity for me, it says, to actually become more serious, thoughtful, reflecting how to act and behave. And sometimes it might not necessarily be that you physically do things, but actually in your mind, just the thought of seeing something, and it's like, Krishna, please help me. And this is a good opportunity, Krishna coming to purify, to actually get rid of that mentality. So it's just a reflection that I have. But I have one question.
Yeah, very nice.
The question that I have is that description that you were giving about the temple in the Janmastami temple.
Krishna
Is that
Janmastami.
is that how do you say? Is that it's not that it's actually being built since that time to the present time, or is it? I was how do you say? And my understanding when you were describing that is that was the same temple or that jail prison. I'm sorry, is still the same.
The location is the same.
The location, but
Yeah.
actually...
It's been built up, and now there's a mosque. Okay? Now there's a mosque over it. So you have to go down a number of stairs and a couple turns left and right and down lower, and then finally you get to where it's understood that the Lord made his appearance, where Vasudeva and Devaki were kept. But it's down a number of stairways. But around it now has been built up a giant mosque, because during the Muslim rule, they did that purposely.
I just want to go back to the previous reflection that I had, because I forgot also another important point. Because in that description, yada devesu vedesu gosu vipresu cha, when Krishna is describing that, actually, if we analyze, he says that all those people actually are inimical to me. They're actually envious of me. So ultimately, the envy, the greed, the loss of everything that we experience in trying to either control, because we're not able to control, you become irritated, you become envious, you become so many things. It ultimately goes, as Krishna says, it's because, to me, all these people are envious of me. Everything that you do there is ultimately because you're envious of me.
Hmm.
And that's
Yes.
really sad.
Yes. Thank you.
Especially when we're trying to become devotees, like me.
Devabrata had a comment?
Hare Krishna. So your story reminded Nanda Kirtan Prabhu and myself about something that happened to us in Las Vegas about 4 years ago. So we were distributing books at a music festival, and Gauranga Prema Prabhu was with us. And we were like kind of using this gas station, like a travel center, as our base. And Gauranga Prema Prabhu really wanted to take a shower one morning. He wanted to take a hot shower. So we were trying to make an arrangement where we could bring him in there and kind of like sneak him into a shower stall. And we snuck him in, but then the guy like, I don't remember, I think Gauranga Prema just like walked right up to him and told him what we were doing, or it was, so Gauranga Prema Prabhu was like, you know, he was like pleading to the guy, he's like, "Sir, please help us, we are homeless." And yeah, the guy like started like chastising Gauranga Prema and like being like super offensive. Ananda was there. I wasn't there to watch it. I had left. But then Ananda came back. He's like, "Yeah, it was a horrible situation. We should have never done that." And Gauranga Prema comes about like 20 minutes. And he's like, "I just paid him." And so 2 years later, when dear Lalita Prabhu and I went to Utah for traveling Sankirtan, we were driving through Las Vegas and my van needed gas and I knew that gas station was there. It's just off the 10. So I was like, all right, I'll just go to this gas station and fill up. So I pull off the highway and I pull into the gas station and there's nothing there. It's just an empty lot. It's just completely blank. It's just a gravel lot with fences around it. And I'm like, what happened? So I look on my phone and I type in, it turns out a month after that Gauranga Prema, myself and Nanda Kirtan were at this gas station, the entire thing burned to the ground.
Be careful. Be careful to commit the Vaishnavas and the devotees. That goes for all of us. We should always be very mindful and appreciative and Tranadapi Sunichainan. We should always be willing to serve the holy name and serve the Vaishnavas. All right, we'll end there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Krishna Janmastami ki jai.